everyone. Thank you to Trainline for inviting me. When NSLondon messaged me about the topic of the presentation, I thought long and hard about what value can I provide for you guys. And then, as a fellow meetup enjoyer, I usually went to those meetups thinking, well, there are people speaking from some successful companies, and what do they do with those companies? So this is what my presentation is basically about. I want to share with you the architecture we use in Revolut, and then show you some pragmatic ways about how we estimated the new project, which was called Revolut 10, how we delivered it, and what were the results. Starting with me, I'm a senior iOS developer at Revolut. My name is Marcel Mierzejewski. Mierzejewski is something nobody can pronounce, so I'll just say hi, I'm Marcel.
I can.
So, fun fact about me, there are two actually. I'm learning Japanese language. I went to Japan pre-pandemic. I didn't speak any language and I had fun, but then I thought, oh, I can have so much more fun if I actually know the language. So I was studying for 4 years and I went 3 months ago. It was awesome. And the second fun fact about me is that I'm the knowledge iOS developer. There is actually one guy called Anthony van der Lee. He has a blog called Swift with Lee. He is a few centimeters below me. We had this argument already. And if you want to settle this debate, I will invite you to my Twitter afterwards, where the arguments are resolved usually. Anyway, let's start with background and context. Revolut is an app that was created in 2014, and it was used mostly by travelers wanting to switch to trader currencies. Maybe I can get a show of hands on how many of you actually have a Revolut account, just to know. And how many of you noticed that we did a big redesign recently? Okay, it's the same hands, I think. So, Revolut in numbers, 35 million customers, 6 million lines of code and more than 200 modules, which I created like 3 yesterday, and 120 iOS developers. So we're talking big organization with big numbers, and that's why in the context of architecture, I think it's important to just tell you what practically worked for us and works still. So what do? We use a clean architecture with MVVM, which basically boils down to those 2 red circles. So we have a data layer. Data layer is constructed of the API service and database. We have data transfer objects that get translated from the repository to the domain object, and then this domain object data is transported by some kind of presenter to for the UI. And then we use flow coordinators and lifecycle behaviors to manage when each screen and each function gets called. For the architecture, everybody starts with the left-hand side. So everybody has an app that has REST, and everything is in one. But then you start adding things, right? You add the feature A, and you add the feature B, and then you add networking, you add some UI modules, and then your app grows and becomes very unmanageable, especially if it's used by more than just few developers. And 120 developers could not possibly work on this big monolith of this one. So we split. Every module, every feature has its own module, and there is also shared modules that are reused between different features. When I was doing research for this presentation, I came across this interesting fact that Martin Conway in 1967, he correlated the organizational structure of a company to its architectural to this software architecture that they use. So when I was working in a small startup consisting of like 20 people in the company, like 3 developers, we just had one monolith app. Like there was no modules, because why? It's not a lot of code. But then I'm working in Revolut now, and we have a bunch of small independent teams, and our architecture also looks like a bunch of small independent modules, which I think is true for every organization that as seen on this diagram. For the release flow, on Tuesdays, 12 o'clock, we freeze the code. Then the next day, it lands on the App Store for in test flight. Then on the test slide, it gets shared, and we have a few days for fixes. And then the next day we have internal beta, external beta, and then the app gets released to the public. This happens every single week. We only skip weeks for like Christmas or some special events. But why is it important in terms of Revolut 10 is that every single week we would ship features, screens, everything, and this would land on your device. So months in advance, you all actually had the redesign ready in your app behind the feature flag. So there was no big release from Revolut 950 something to Revolut 10. No, the Revolut 10 code was there for several months ahead, which is important because we could test regressions and we could also continuously do battle testings to see what works and what doesn't. For the organizational context, we have 3 different types of teams. We have platform team that basically works like a DevOps. They make everything smooth. What they did recently is they introduced Bazel, which allowed us to basically cut in half the build times and the test times on the CI. It's important for every developer. Nobody, those are the things that we as product developers don't usually think about, but in the organization like this you have to. And we also have a design system team. So what we do atomic design, which basically means that every single component is created before, and then its public API is very, very small, so that you cannot really change the color of the font, you cannot really change the size of it. Every component that you see here, this is a sample app for our UI kit. So there is a folder for Revolut 10, and you have all those different kind of headers. Usually design system team works on the problems that multiple different teams might have. Because for the product teams, if something is used just by one product, then they have to create their own UI component. Product teams do business logic, they do entire UI flows, but they also contribute to some tooling, they also contribute to what platform team does and design system team does. So Revolut 10. Management comes to you and says, oh, we have this huge redesign, but why? Because Revolut grew a lot. So we had this marketplace idea where there was a third tab where you could find products, and at first there was like 10 products, but then it grew to 14, and then people would just get lost. So simplicity was the thing that we wanted to get out of this presentation, get out of this redesign. And here's how it looks, for example, for crypto. So I was working on the screen on the right. As you can see, a lot changed, but for me the most important part was one, the navigation. We are no longer a tab in a plethora of tabs. We're a separate tab or icon here. So we can do a little bit more with our navigation. So the entire navigation has changed. And also we have more space for things like chart and chart interactions, etc. So they showed me the designs and then they asked me, okay, so how long is it going to take? Like, what's the estimated time for the completion of this project? And the right answer is, let me get back to you later. Like, thinking about this and stretching this across time usually is a very good idea, because the more time it takes, usually the better it gets. So how do we estimate? Let me tell you in few points what worked for us the most. First of all, the importance of units. 120 working days and 6 months is the same amount of time. But one significance, important difference is that one focuses, one is more precise. So if I said that something is going to take 120 days, my manager expects me to take 120 days to do it. But if I say that something takes 6 months, they expect something from 5 to 7 months. So my rule of thumb is that if something is taking less than 2 weeks, then you could estimate it in days. If something takes less than 2 months, I would say you provide an estimation with weeks. And if something takes more than 6 months, then it's probably wrong, because there is very little you can do to estimate projects bigger than 6 months. You can only plan so much ahead. So I would say descope the feature, like make it just smaller, so that you can fit your work in 6 months. For some starting points, estimations are more like art than a skill, so I would say if you haven't done this, just consult your colleagues because they have, and they might aid you with their experience and knowledge. If you don't have colleagues, you can review your past projects and see how long things took, of course. But then you have to also remember that, for example, I can see 2 screens here, right? So I can estimate that one will take X amount of days, like let's say 10, and the second will take 5. So both of them will not take 15. Actually, you have to think about how they're connected. You have to think about what are the dependencies between them and the flows that you can put them in. So when estimating, remember to kind of fill in between time as well. And I would also suggest you provide your estimations in ranges. So if I asked you, well, how long would it take to paint a house? So you can paint a house in 8 hours. But then if the paint runs out, it will take 12 hours because I have to go to the shop. And then if the ladder is too short and I can paint from the very top, which wouldn't happen to me, then it will take more hours maybe 18 hours to bring a new ladder. And then if it rains, it will take another second day to paint because the paint got wet. So because of this, I can express my uncertainties in range. So for the screen, I can say, oh, it will take from 5 to 20 days. And then I know that there is a lot of uncertainty there. But if I say it will take 5 to 6 days, I probably am right on the number. But then comes a deadline. So as your estimation is 12 months, and the deadline is in 6 months. So what do? You don't become a 10x developer, because you can realistically do 6 months of work in 6 months. You cannot do otherwise. So you prepare a guillotine. This is the technique that we use, is that you as a developer go over every single feature that you have to do. Then you as a developer assign a priority. It's very important to do it yourself first, because then you get a better understanding about of the model of the system, like what is important, what is not. Then you get to your product owner or product manager, and then you ask that person, okay, how right was I or how wrong was I on the priorities? And then you sit together and then you cut the features out of it to make it go from 12 months to 6 months. And this is what we did in Revolut 10. So our 6 months have focused on the home screen, which we did. And then the other 6 months, which we're doing, is the asset details. So we just cut out half of the expected project just because it didn't fit in the 6 months. So those are a few tips about how to estimate and how do we deliver stuff. To know what you're going to draw, you have to begin drawing. You can draw with prototypes. So I told you before about how we do modules, right? So for example, in crypto module, not only we have crypto source code and crypto tests, but also we have crypto app. Every single module has an app. The app is the thing that you see in the middle screenshot. You can access every single screen from there, and also you can access both the live screens that take the data from the cloud, and you can access the mocked screens which take the data from whatever you hard coded there. So you can always look how it works. You can test for loading, you can test for error states. Important thing to add here is that sorry. Okay, I lost it. Anyway, let's go to the engineering practices and mindset. I will tell you about 3 different things here, about the way how we collaborate, about the tools that we use, and the mindset that we have, starting with the last one, mindset. So for the mindset, I would say that the most important thing is that the maintenance starts from day one. You probably heard about broken windows theory. You see an old building, it doesn't have broken windows, it's an old building. But the moment you start, the moment somebody breaks the first window, then the graffiti comes in, then the tag comes in, then the second second window gets broken, and the third, and then it becomes a ruin. Don't let your code base become a ruin. Refactor as you go. Take time for some maintenance, because maintenance is not just a thing that happens after the release. I think it happens as you program at all times. One thing that I wanted to mention also is how do we do code reviews. I think it's important to do a nice code review. Sometimes we have this teammate where if you send them a link, they will just instantly approve your pull request. And this is sometimes nice, but I would say if you rely on this teammate to push your code, it's a very bad practice because you both lose a lot. The best teammates are those who always leave some comments, like always. They find something, some nitpicking, maybe something bigger, just to leave some comments, because I believe those are the best teammates because they encourage discussions and they make you think twice about your code, and they also you also feel a sense of satisfaction, because if they found something, that it probably means that they read your code and otherwise they approve it. For the tools that we use, of course, we use a bunch of tools. Things like Sorcery, things like Swifting, things like some automated danger messages or connections to Slack. But the practical tool that we use every single day, multiple times a day, is our own tool, scripts. Scripts can do whatever you want. For example, we have script that takes localizations from the web, downloads them, unzips them, removes the old ones, adds the new ones, and saves them, and then generates the new strings. We have script that, for example, does a cherry pick, so it goes to the release branch, makes a branch, commits whatever you want to cherry pick, and then creates a pull request, and then sends it to the platform team to approve it and hotfix it. So they do all. The important thing is that they are written in Swift. I encourage you to try scripting in Swift, because then every single developer, every single iOS developer already knows the language, and it's very easy to get into them. It's very easy to improve upon them, and more importantly, it's also easy to mix them up. So you can have a chain of different scripts being run one by one, and you'll always understand what's happening there because you already know the programming language that they have been written in. And another tool that I'm using is an engineering daybook. Actually, I have one. It's called my mobile diary. So what I do here is, there's tons of different ways to use the daybooks. But what I do is I have a 5-point rule, which basically, every single day in the evening, I sit down and I figure 5 things that I want to do tomorrow. So here's how it looks. It's very messy, but 5 things that I want to do tomorrow. So I wake up the next morning and I know what do I have to do. I don't have to think about it. So I do those things. If I do 3 of them, I'm very happy with the day. I can always add more, remove, or whatever, but by the end of the day, I want to have 5 new things to do tomorrow. This is like this. So every day I get to do something, and I already have my work planned out. You can also use it for the meetings. If you ever had a meeting, and I think you had, if you have your notebook and then you scribble something when somebody says an important fact, then you look hella smart, because I mean, come on, who does it? Who uses pen and paper in these times? And also there is like additional uses, like, I don't know, you can doodle if the meeting is boring, or you can plan out your architecture, you can scribble. I would really recommend having a notebook, because it helped me a lot. It helped me a great deal. Another tool, maybe was under the mindset, is pair programming. What I do with Victor, who is my teammate, is sometimes we will get a call. It's not scheduled, it's not every day, but then when some of us have a problem, we get on a call and we reserve like 2 hours to sit down and think about it. We remember to role switch from time to time. We try to criticize the code, not each other. I think it's a very nice idea. I heard that some companies are doing this with 2 keyboards. Some companies doing what's called remote programming, which is more than 2 people. Like imagine 5 people with your designer and with your manager, everybody sitting in front of one computer and coding stuff. This certainly has a lot of value. I never seen it actually working, but I can imagine. Anyway, pair programming works. I think they do it here at Trainline. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that this was done a lot. So maybe you can ask people working here later in the pub. Perfect is the enemy of. Oh, this is something else. And for the code reviews as well, what we did is we have this template for every pull request that you make. We have some test checklist, and we have to include some screenshots as well. So what's here if it's the font split mode? So for tests, you always have to have unit tests for every single feature that you do. If it's related to flow or screens, you have to have UI tests as well. If it's related to changing the components, it has to have a snapshot test as well. And then for the screenshot, you have to test the loading state, you have to test the error state, you have to test the empty state, you have to test the light mode, and you have to test the dark mode, and the offline behavior. So every single pull request description looks like this. I think it's very nice because if somebody puts time to make a description look nice, I feel like they also put a lot of time and effort to make the code look nice. So if I come inside and see a pull request that has a nice description, my approach to it changes drastically. But then the actual life happens, and the bug happens. So of course you don't want bugs to happen, right? Like, but life, right? Imperfections are always, and I think it's important to stress that we can release software, and then those imperfections will happen. But then good software today is better than perfect software tomorrow, and I could argue that perfect software tomorrow doesn't exist, because it's important to get those things out to the customers as fast as possible. And then, for example, for when we released Rev 10, we tested it internally a lot, but then like 100 bugs happened in the first week, so it was okay. We didn't expect them, but we kind of did, because of course those things happen. It's about continuous improvement, it's about fixing those bugs, but more importantly, it's about delivering something over a promise of something. Over a promise of something. So we've been through the architectural overview and how do we estimate and how we deliver. So what were the results? First of all, I scraped some reviews from tests from App Store, and people love it. The most important thing here is that it feels more like a tech company than a bank, and I'm very proud of that. People like it, but in numbers, 92% of people didn't hate it. What I mean by that is that usually when you redesign stuff and you change stuff in software, people don't like change. So for us, 50% of the people who got the update actually liked it. Around 20% didn't care, and about 20% didn't notice, which leaves us about 8 people that actually hated the change, which I think is actually a great number. We had 6% more daily users, 21% more spend per user, and I got my senior promotion because I delivered this. Because I delivered this Revolut 10 crypto project on time. So for conclusions, I'm not gonna be diving deep into reading all of them. I think the most important one is the first one. So be the change. It all starts from the bottom. I started changing stuff myself, and then I saw a lot of people following those changes. One of the things, for example, we did is we started organizing internal meetups, and those were not meetups organized by some management. It was just 10 developers that felt the need to have a meetup, and then we did this meetup. And then it was 16 developers who had the need to have a meetup, and then we had this one. And then I think the more we do it, the better it gets. And then at some point, somebody will notice and also take responsibility for creating something more, so maybe some internal conferences, etc. And educate yourself. I know that you're here to do just that. I'm very happy that you listened to my presentation. Thank you very much. This was what worked for me. So organizers told me that we have, oh, by the way, if you want to settle this argument, it's linked to my Twitter account. Organizers told me that we have a few more minutes for some questions, so I may have skimmed over some topics, so if you want to go deeper, we can either chat later in the pub, or maybe you have something that you would like to add to this presentation, so I can respond to that. Any hands? Hands.
Which one? Okay, I have a question about the modularization you have. So you said you have more than 200 modules, and you use Bazel. My question is, how do you manage the diamond dependency problems or implicit dependency issues between features and utility modules? Make sense?
Yeah. So for that, the one I do not understand the internal workings of Bazel team. That was done by the platform team, but basically the split. We had to split the app because we have three applications actually as Revolut. Revolut has the application retail, which you probably all use, and then we have an application for under 18 and then an application for businesses as well. So at some point somebody realized that we need to share some code, and then we don't want to import everything, right? So we started scraping, adding new modules and scraping all the dependencies that you don't need or don't have, so that, for example, the UI kit app that I showed you previously can be imported into business and retail, but some of them they cannot be because of other dependencies. We are trying hard to make it work so that those shared modules are as small as possible and they don't have a lot of dependencies on their own. But it's a work in progress currently. And about the split, we had a few different ideas. As I showed in the presentation, we started with like one big module, and of course new modules came along as the need came. So what we did for some time is we had a core module and a UI module, so that, for example, you could create anything that has to do with crypto and crypto core module, and then you would have crypto UI module for iOS and a crypto watch UI module for the watches, and then another, for example, for VisionOS or something else, right? So, so we would do that, but then we realized that maybe we can go even more deep into this, and we started creating feature modules where every single module has actually very little. So we made a tool to create new modules, so it's very easy. So now, for example, a module can be just a few simple domain objects, or it could be just a networking layer for something, right? So you could later use it in any UI that you can create. Is this somehow answering your question, or do you have? Thank you.
I can follow it up later.
Okay. Any other ones? I see one hand there. Do you want the microphone?
No, I can ask this. Actually, I guess you changed a lot of things last 6 months, and I really wonder, how do you keep the know-how level of the team the same? Because I think it's really important. I just want to know about that.
Yeah, I see. So it was kind of a blank state. So we had a lot of time and place to experiment with new design patterns, etc. So what we usually do is we have this Wednesday call that every single iOS developer is invited to. And what we did was that, first of all, you try the new design pattern in your team, in your module, see how it works, consult it with people who work with your module, and then if they approve this suggestion, then you would present on this Wednesday call to everybody in the company. Then you would get some feedback from both platform teams, and then everybody can start using this design pattern. But it's also important to say that I don't really know what's happening in the other 198 modules. I know my 3 modules well, and I know that they're similar to each other because I work in them. But then other modules can be completely different. And at the end of the day, the thing that I care about is the public API, right? So what do they give me? What is basically marked as public in the entire module? Because all the other can be very different depending on what the module is. So there is a lot of design patterns that I don't know, but also I don't care about because they happen very far away from me.
Is it more about the proposal approval? Like,
There is no strict approval. As I said, we are small and independent teams. Every team has few different modules and they can do whatever they want in their app. Okay, maybe one last question because I can see we're over 30-minute mark.
So I can shout your question. That's all right. First of all, thank you for the presentation. It was great. And my question is, you worked on redesign. And you mentioned that you have feature models, some sort of, and platform models. Platform models, you mentioned the design system stays under that. And I'm curious, how did you prioritize work when you need something, when you needed something from platform team, from your design system, to lay out these elements on screens that probably you work on with your feature models?
Yeah, this is actually a very it's a recurring theme about wanting something from platform because it's always the easiest to like, oh, this is a new component, we don't have it. Can you make it? But then design system team says, well, actually only you need it, so you make it. It's like, as I said before, they usually work on the problems that deal with that the entire company deals with, and they work for developers. So they don't always have time to be focusing on the chart that I need, for example, or this one thing that keeps happening. So it has to go through their approval, more designers' approval than developers' approval, but then the developers usually are very happy to help, but also they're not gonna make UI components for you. Every single developer, I think during the onboarding to Revolut, one of the first things you learn during your probation is how to make UI components so that you can do it yourself. Actually, we have a developer from design system team here with us, so I can connect with you with him later, so we can ask all the questions about design. Okay, guys, thank you very much for listening to me.